start. Woo, recording in progress. We're opening things up and look, there are already many of you in the room. So you guys are the best. You are the best. Oh, do you know that April is we have done 4 years. Does that make it? That makes it our 4th anniversary, right? We have done 4 years of these happy hours. And I'm so excited that you guys are with me. And it is still fun. It is still so much fun. Uh, for those of you who are just getting on, first of all, know that we'll chat for a couple of minutes here while people are finding that they are in the right place. Okay. And for those of you who aren't aware, I started these happy hours in April of 2020, shortly after the lockdown, when it was really unclear whether Hyannis Country Garden was going to be alive after the pandemic or not, because during the initial weeks of the lockdown, nobody knew which businesses would be allowed to be open. Of course, nobody knew if anybody would even want to be thinking about plants. And so I began these happy hours as a way to keep people engaged in something life affirming, because boy, we needed it then, didn't we? And so during the pandemic, we got together once a week for that year 2020, because we needed it once a week. We needed a plant fix and a life affirming fix that frequently. And now I'm doing them once a month, and I am so pleased that so many of you are either joining me for the first time or have been with me since the pandemic. So thank you. It is wonderful because we are still celebrating the same thing: life affirming gardens and plants, and being together on a Friday for an hour to talk about that. And that's what it's all about. Those of you who have been with me before know that I would love for you to type into chat. First of all, if it's your first time on a happy hour with me, I love to know that. Second of all, I want to know what's in your glass. It doesn't matter what's in your glass, because whether it's a cup of tea, coffee, sparkling water, a cocktail, wine, whatever it is, the important thing is that we are taking time together to sit down, take a deep breath, and focus on something wonderful, which are plants and gardens. And so I love to know that you are with me, that you have the beverage of choice in your hand, and you can type that in chat. And of course, I love to know if this is your first time here. That's number one. So, and I see so many of you. We've got cocoa and green tea and red wine and Starbucks instant. That must be instant coffee, maybe. And hot tea, and on and on. All of it sounds delicious. And I just wish that, I could raise a cup or a glass with you, but it's impossible to drink and talk at the same time. So there we go. Okay. For those of you who are here with me for first time for such a happy hour, know that don't click on the raise your hand thing at the bottom of the screen as I'm talking, because I don't pay any attention to that. Okay. What I do pay attention to is questions typed in chat. And this is how we work. Because I'm incapable of multitasking, monitoring chat, raised hands, or whatever, and giving the presentation, what I will do is I will give the presentation first that I have prepared for you. And then we have plenty of time for questions after. And no matter what you have questions about, your hydrangeas, the gift plant you got at Easter, starting seeds, your lawn, I don't care what it is, type that in chat. I will answer as many questions as I can that are typed in chat, starting from the top to the bottom. I'll just go through in order. And if I don't get to them all by 6 o'clock, which is our dinner hour cutoff time, okay, then I have to go and cook. So at 6 o'clock, I will save chat to my computer, and any questions that weren't answered alive, I will write up your answers in the Country Garden blog at hyanniscountrygarden.com. And I usually do that either on Sunday or Monday. So look for the answers to questions that I haven't had time to do here live on the blog the following week. Okay. So, and I'm so glad so many of you have been with me from the beginning. You've got a tasty sounding beverage, you've starting seeds. Uh, Thank you. Thank you. We're going to have a great time. So let's get going. And I am going to start sharing my presentation. We've got, by the way, 84 people in the room. And, you know, we're all have space to hang out. So excellent. Let's go here. Let me get to my presentation. Let me get to share. Let me get to play slideshow. And here we are. We are springing into joy. And by the way, we are also live streaming on Facebook. So hi to all my Facebook people who are joining us. If you type questions in comments on Facebook, I will answer them later after this is over, because as I say, I can't go back and forth to too many things. There's only so much that one person can do. So type your questions in the chat box if you are with me on Zoom, put them in the comments on Facebook, and I will get them all answered one way or the other. So let's spring into joy. All right, the daffodils, the narcissus are blooming out there. They are one of the most reliable spring bulbs. The deer and the bunnies don't touch them. You can plant them and have them multiply like this. This is a clump of narcissus that I put in the garden probably maybe 10 or 12 years ago. And look, it's divided and keeps coming back and is just so joyful. So it is a wonderful time outdoors. The hyacinths are also very reliable. You know, they are a very reliable bulb. And I have hyacinths blooming that have been put in the ground years ago. If you have purchased either narcissus or hyacinths in pots, know that plant them in the ground right away and they will come back for years to come. If you have purchased tulips in pots, plant them in the ground fairly quickly. They may or may not come back for years to come. Tulips are a little less short-lived, but you should get them back at least for one more year. I am loving at this point how my Japanese forest grass, and you know, I did consultations today at Hyannis Country Garden. For those of you who don't know, I'm there on Fridays from 9 to 3. I answer a lot of design questions, plant ID questions, plant problems. You know, it's a free service. I'm there except for the noon hour from 12 to 12:30. I take lunch, and otherwise it's free, first come, first serve. Come and talk to me. All right. And I'd had several people come and talk to me today with design questions, and they brought in pictures on their, you know, cell phone or on their tablet. And one of the plants that I recommended at least twice today was Japanese forest grass, which is Hakona Cloa. Sounds like you're coughing up a fur ball. I know, Hakona Cloa. But despite the amusing botanic name, this is an amazing plant. And by the way, if you want to remember anything that is in this happy hour, number one, it is being recorded, and the recording will be on the Hyannis Country Garden events page at the bottom of the events. All the recordings are there from this happy hour and previous happy hours, so you can watch them at your leisure and make note of this. Or you can always shoot, you know, the name of a plant and the picture with your cell phone, or take a screenshot on your computer or your tablet, and then you remember. Now, why do I love Japanese forest grass? Well, because of this particular variety, Aureola, is a butter yellow, and this is how it looks in April when it first comes up. So you've got color from the beginning with this plant. And then you have color with this low growing grass all summer long and through the fall until hard frost. So a colorful perennial, one that is pretty low maintenance. I don't touch it until I cut it down later in the spring, when I'm getting ready for, in March, I cut the old stuff down and then the new stuff comes up in April. And it loves part shade. So part shade does okay in full shade. Part shade is fine, and part sun is fine as well. The star magnolias are in full bloom, and I noticed on my way home tonight that the pink magnolias are starting to open up as well. The very first magnolia to open up is the star magnolia. And if you want a very small tree, this is a good one to choose because it does stay small and it is the first one to bloom. So that we know it is spring when the star magnolias open. And we know it is spring when we see these two weeds in our gardens and our lawns. We've got the corn speedwell, which at this time of year is very tight and low, as you see there on the left. And later it will have tiny blue or purplish flowers on it. Then there is the bittercress, which right now will be covered with tiny, tiny white flowers in your lawn and garden. And I did have a couple of people ask me about this plant today when they came in to see me at Hyannis Country Garden. So both of these are annual weeds. They are cool weather weeds that germinate in the fall or even the winter or even the early spring and then continue to grow. Because they are annual weeds, if you just pull them off the top or hoe them, if you don't want to bend over, a hoe is a must-have tool. And you can chop off weeds like this, right? And then rake them out of the way. And the bittercress in particular, this one that's in bloom right now, if you want to have less of it next year, you need to get rid of it quickly because it is in bloom next right now. And what follows flowers? Seeds, right? And those seeds will be the ones that will germinate in your yard and garden next fall and spring and winter. Now, these are popping up right now, and they come in clusters. They're very interesting. This is jewelweed, our native impatiens. And I have little clusters of jewelweed all over. I suspect that my clusters like this have been planted by birds, that they have harvested these in the fall and have tucked them in, and I have a whole cluster of impatiens seedlings. When they are in my flower beds, I pull them out. When they are along the edges of the property, right, or in a slightly wild area, I leave them because they are a nice native weed that's kind of pretty, right, with a orange flower, and it's a good pollinator support plant. So some of our native weeds, if you have the right spot, are worth leaving. But in my flower beds, I'm pulling these out. My swamp maple is blooming. They have red flowers. So look as you drive around the Cape for the Acer rubrum, because against a clear blue sky, it is a beautiful sight. This is a wonderful native tree. If you have one, cherish it. Do what you can to protect them because they are important plants. And like many of our native trees, unfortunately, I call them Rodney Dangerfield trees. They get no respect because people kind of treat them as common, and they are very important in our landscape. Now, I know that people are wondering, what about the hydrangeas? Not a native plant, but a signature plant for Cape Cod, and one that we love and that we care about, one that makes us happy. And I'm here to report that so far, knock on wood, knock on wood, knock on anything, say a prayer. So far, it looks like a fantastic hydrangea year. I have hydrangeas, one on my property, one on my neighbor's property. The one on my property is glowing embers, and it is not very bud hardy, which means that even in an average Cape Cod winter, it often doesn't bloom the following year because the buds get killed. My neighbor has Big Daddy, which is not very bud hardy. And even in an average Cape Cod winter, the buds die and that plant doesn't bloom. I'm here to tell you that right now, my glowing embers and his Big Daddy have filled with buds. And when you see these buds, like you see on this picture, the germ of this year's flower is in that leaf bud, okay? So far, it's looking good. Barring a, 20-degree 2-night freeze later in April, which is possible, but every day that we go forward, less likely. So barring that, it is going to be a great year for hydrangeas. Now, you can remove the dead canes soon. Okay, so if you have any canes that don't have those green buds, you can cut them out. This year, you should have mostly canes with green buds, I'm telling you. It's not going to look like this. This was last year's hydrangea in my property, where this was the only cane here, down here on the bottom, that had green buds. So you should have mostly green buds, but don't neaten them up. Oh, I put the text too far over to the left here. Sorry. That text that goes off the edge, it says, don't neaten them up. Here is a tale of two hydrangeas. The plant on the left wasn't cut back at all. It wasn't cleaned up. It wasn't made into a nice round mound of sticks, either in the fall or the spring. The one on the right was made into a nice round mound of sticks in the fall or the spring. This was the same year. This is the same plant, an endless summer. They should both be filled with flowers as the one on the left is, but the one on the right is not, because it was neatened up. Don't let anybody clean up your hydrangeas. The only pruning you should do is to remove what doesn't have buds. And if you have terminal buds like this, the ones on the top, by all means, do not cut them back. That's going to be your biggest, strongest flower, right? That's going to be a hydrangea celebration. So don't let anyone who doesn't know much about these plants touch your hydrangeas. You do want to prune roses now. We prune roses when the forsythia is in bloom, and my forsythia is in bloom now. Down in Falmouth, it's been in bloom for a little bit longer. I think in some of the colder areas, it's just coming into flower. And the forsythia is a good indicator of a couple of things. The forsythia indicates when our soil is getting close to 50 degrees, which means that's the time to put down a pre-emergent herbicide on your lawn if you use such a thing. And it means it's time to prune roses. And the roses all have red growth on them, like you see the red buds. And so you prune above a red bud. And you can cut the tips if they're dried off here, and you cut the tips off there. And so this is a great time. And by the way, you start pruning roses by getting rid of anything that's dead. Remove the dead wood first. That's step one on roses. And then you can clip them and clean them up a little bit. Thumper is back. Thumper is back, and Thumper is hungry, and Thumper is looking for something to eat. And so if you know that Thumper, rabbits, have been eating certain plants in your yard or garden traditionally, you want to spray them ASAP with a rabbit repellent. And I'll show you the best one in a second. The same rabbit repellent works for deer, and this is what I saw outside my kitchen window last night. This is a piebald deer. You see how she's white on her feet here, and she's white on the stomach and on the rump and the other side. That's called a piebald animal. It's a genetic thing that's actually quite rare. So, hi, piebald. I'm calling her Whitey. and Whitey, it was with another deer in my property last night. So knowing that Thumper and Whitey are out and about, don't let them get into the habit of eating in your garden. So this is what you want to do. Animals are creatures of habit, and part of being coexisting as neighbors. They are our neighbors, right? It's their land too. It's their property too. And we need to remember that. So we are not battling them. We are not fighting them, right? We are dancing with them every year. And we are coexisting because we all want to get along with our neighbors, right? Nobody wants to fight with neighbors. So the way to get along with the animals, rabbits and deer specifically, is to tell them from day one that something isn't on their menu. And my favorite repellent for animal and deer is this, plant skid. It is a blood-based repellent. I'm warning you, when you spray it the first time, it looks like a murder has happened in your garden, right? Sometimes it doesn't smell great, but I do promise you that by the second day after you spray it, not only will you not see it anymore, you won't smell it, but the deer and rabbits do. Deer and rabbits are vegans. They don't eat animal products. And so spraying this on the plants that they like, starting now, is a good idea. Now, once that plant is fully leafed out and you spray it so the whole thing smells like something that Thumper and Bambi won't eat, then you're golden. You don't have to keep doing it because this is the longest lasting rabbit and deer repellent that I have ever used. And when I put something new in my garden that I don't know if Thumper is going to eat or not, I don't go to bed at night until I spray it with plant skid so that I know that the rabbit won't get into the habit of eating that plant. And that's how we can coexist. So I have gardens all around my property. If you've ever been to see me during the Hydrangea Festival, you know I've got plants, more plants than humans should be allowed to have. And I can look out and I see the rabbits munching the weeds in the cracks of my patio. I call them my wabbit leaders. And I see the rabbits eating the clover in my lawn. I have intentionally planted white clover in my lawn, and they eat that. Fine. I can enjoy how cute they are, but they are leaving my echinacea alone, right? They are leaving my daylilies alone. And so plant skid, I love it. Okay, wait until May to plant your gift hydrangeas outdoors. These are gift hydrangeas that we had at Easter. Many people, these are lift your heart plants when you buy them at Easter. So lift your heart by all means, right? But don't plant those outside until later in May because they are, as you know, far accelerated. Our hydrangeas out in the landscape are just budded, barely budded now. So these would be destroyed if you plant them out right now. Keep them inside, but keep them moist. This is the key with a gift hydrangea. You will need to water it far more frequently than you water any other houseplant because what you don't want is this to happen. This is a gift hydrangea that has gotten too dry. It is wilted. If this happens more than once, your gift hydrangea is likely to have brown flowers and it's going to lose leaves. It's not going to look good. So, if I have a hydrangea in the house at this time of year, I water it every 2 days. You don't want to let it sit in water in the saucer. You want to water it well, let it drain into a saucer. Take, after an hour or two, sop up the excess water with a terry cloth towel, right? But water it frequently because gift hydrangeas are very root bound and they dry up quickly. And then plant them outside later in May in a place that gets morning sun and afternoon shade. Many of them are quite hardy here on Cape Cod. I can't guarantee that every gift hydrangea that you buy is. I know that the varieties that we sold at Country Garden are, and in fact, the varieties that we sold this year at Country Garden are remontant, and that means that they will flower on both last year's canes and the new growth, like Endless Summer. Endless Summer is the remontant variety that most people are aware with. Okay, let's talk about seeds started indoors. Right now, I have my tomatoes growing under lights. If you have something growing under lights, know a couple of things. One, you want to keep those lights close to the plants. You see how close those fluorescent bulbs are to those tomatoes? You want to keep them about 3 to 4 inches above your seedlings, because that's what keeps the seedlings strong. If the lights aren't close, or if you've got them in a window where there isn't much light, they are going to get leggier and, thinner and weaker. The other thing to know is that you want to have a fan on your seedlings. These are my seedlings right now that are under lights. And as you can see, I had a fan going. I have that fan on a timer, and the fan simulates the outside world, and the movement of those plants with the fan keeps them stronger. So put a little fan on your seedlings inside, and that's going to help them to stay stronger. Warm weather annuals and vegetables can't go outside until the middle or the end of May. Again, you want the nighttime temperatures reliably above 50 before they go out. So you want to keep them as strong as possible. I was reading my BBC Gardener's World magazine. It's a magazine from the UK the other morning, and one of the regular commentators for that magazine was saying that don't start things too early inside. He said, being a bit late is better than being too early. And I am in so agreement with that, particularly for those of you who are on Cape Cod, because our springs are cold. They are cold. Now, speaking of cold and speaking of spring and speaking of looking forward, this is the greenhouse today. This is the greenhouse that we very affectionately call the Taj, short for the Taj Mahal. When it was first built, my friend Heather Holbrook nicknamed it the Taj Mahal because it was so grand compared to what was here before. And it has remained the Taj ever since. So in the Taj, we have an assortment here down below of vegetables and herbs, but look at what's going on up here. Yay! The first tropicals have arrived, including the things like mandevilla vine. The shorter varieties of mandevilla are here, the ones that are also known as Diplodenia. They are all now in the genus Mandevilla, but they come in many colors, white and pink and red and yellow. We've got pots, we've got hanging baskets. There are all kinds of them. There are other lantana, topiaries, the standards, right? Tropical plants, right? Here, tall, mandevilla is already quite tall. There are tropical hibiscus in all kinds of colors. This is making me thrilled. There are the cordyline, commonly called Thai plants, that are so beautiful. So here's what you need to know. By all means, if you see something you love right now, buy it, because who knows, we may get more in, we may not, right? And that's my personal rule at a country garden. If I see a plant that I know that I want to have in my garden, when I see it, I purchase it. Because again, sometimes our vendors run out. Sometimes the other customers get to something before I do. Horrors, right? And sometimes we don't see it again. So I certainly, if you see something that you love right now, buy it. But if it's a tropical, like the things I just showed you, put it outside during the day and bring it in at night. And you want to do that until the temperatures are reliably above 50 degrees at night. Look at the app on your phone. Look at, listen to the 10-day forecast on the television weather. Whatever it is, look and see, and you want to see that 10-day forecast at night be reliably above 50 before you leave those tropicals outside. Because if you put them outside now and leave them out at night, they are going to respond by saying, "What hell is this?" And they are not going to look good in a couple of weeks. So leave them out in the day if you want, bring them in at night, enjoy them as, you know, front hall decorations during the evening, or kitchen decorations during the evening. But wait until the temperatures at night are above 50. There are all kinds of plants that you can plant right now outside. And if you see plants outside at Hyannis Country Garden now, those are hardened off. They are hardy in these temperatures, and you can plant them outside too. So if you want to get things in your window boxes, you want to put things in your urns and containers, choose from the plants that are outside right now, and you will be a happy person. There are so many perennials that have flooded into the store recently, including a lot of spring flowering plants and including a lot of the smaller quart perennials that, later in the summer we'll have bigger perennials. But for those of you who like to start small, as I frankly often do, I mean, there's nothing like being able to buy 5 plants for the price of 2, right? So if you like to start small, there is a great selection at this point, particularly of those spring flowering plants. Dianthus, which you see here, the pinks, and creeping thyme, and columbines, and the heuchras. I mean, you can't beat these coral bells, the heuchras, for color. They are amazing. There are little rock garden plants like Lewisia, and little lavenders. And there are the very sweet little forget-me-nots, and various plants that are very pretty. Oh, this one is Tiarella. Tiarella is a great native spring blooming plant. If you've got a shade garden, you have to have Tiarella. And there are in bloom right now at Country Garden. And stonecrop sedums, a lot of the little plants that are good for planting in between patio rocks. They are in and in small pots right now. So that's a wonderful thing. The herbs are in too. And these are herbs that can go in pots right now outside. Bay leaf, right? Fine, outside right now. Catnip. If you've got a cat, you got to have it. The chives are fine outside right now. Coriander, fine. Dill and fennel, fine outside right now. Marjoram, go ahead and plant it. Mint, I'd say plant it in a pot because it wants to take over the world. So don't put this in your raised bed. Oregano, planted in a pot, not in a raised bed. It wants to take over the world. The parsleys, fine outside. Small lavenders and rosemaries, by all means, put them out. Sage, great. Thyme, fantastic. The one thing you should not put outside right now is basil. Basil is another above 50 degrees at night plant, so wait on that. The vegetable plants that can go outside right now include kale and peas and lettuce and broccoli and all the members of the cole family, like Brussels sprouts and cabbage and cauliflower. All of those can go out at this point. Leeks you can plant out right now as well. So have some fun with these plants. What I like to do is choose some of those perennials like this heuchera. This is an English daisy labeled as a perennial, not really a perennial on Cape Cod, so don't count on that coming back. But there's a dianthus in this pot as well. And those, after spring is over, I transplant into other places in the garden where they will be perennial. And of course, we love the pansies. So put some of those in a container and celebrate. And don't forget to pick some of your flowers, daffodils, tulips, forsythia branches, whatever you've got flowering right now. Bring them in the house, especially so that you have them indoors on a day like today, when it was once again raining, wet, cloudy, right? Not so pleasant to be enjoying these outside. But if you pick them, you can have your own personal spring celebration and flower show in your house. So make note here. I've got our website. I've got my email at Country Garden down here. Keep in touch. If you have a question, don't hesitate to email me. And we're going to get out of the slideshow now. I'm going to stop this share and we are going to come back. I am going to open up chat, and whatever questions you have, I'm going to take from the top to the bottom. Okay. Now somebody said my screen wasn't sharing. Did everybody else see my screen? I don't see anybody else commenting on that. So I am assuming that we got there. All right. All right. Let's see. And I don't answer raised hands. Type it in the chat. Okay. Type it in the chat. All right. Let's see. Okay. I'm getting to the first question. Vertical planters seem to be all the rage this season. What do you think about them? Worth the investment? Kind of depends. You want a vertical planter that is going to be easy to water. Number one, know that they often need very careful watering so that you get everything well saturated. It's not something you can kind of squirt from the outside quickly and be done. It depends on the vertical planter. I would say pick one that you love how it looks, number one. Pick one that has as much dirt to hold the plants, number two. And then you're going to need to pay attention to watering it well. But for those who have limited space, I'm all for them. I'm all for it if you have limited space. Okay, very good. Thank you. Love some easy maintenance perennial, please. Also, what's a great ground cover to take over a shady area behind a house? All right, easy maintenance perennials. Number one, I would say catmint is an easy maintenance perennial. Number two, stokesia, commonly called Stokes aster, easy maintenance perennial. Number three, Russian sage. Number four, calamint, not catmint, but calamint, Calamintha nepetoides. Calamint is an easy maintenance perennial. The blue star, native blue star, the botanic name is Hubrechtii is the species name. What is it? Why am I blanking on it? Anyway, blue star, and that is an easy maintenance perennial. The helianthus, our yellow daisies, are easy maintenance perennials, and I would say that the Montauk daisies are pretty easy maintenance perennials. So those are a few to get you started, and we will be posting something about easy maintenance perennials on the Hyannis Country Garden blog coming up. So look for that, okay? Best time to plant bulbs, ferns, caladiums, and oh, wait, I forgot your easy maintenance, your ground cover. If you have here's the thing, people often want ground covers that grow fast, right? But a fast growing ground cover doesn't stop. I would steer you away from English ivy. I think it's a plague on the planet. So number one. Number two, Pachysandra is pretty easy maintenance as a ground cover in shade. Number three, I like the geranium macrorhizum. And that is and it's not the window box geranium. It's a perennial geranium, macrorhizum. The deer and bunnies don't eat it. It's weed smothering. So that's a good one. If you have a very large space, the native um, whitewood aster used to be called Aster divaricatus. Now it's Aruba divaricata. Whitewood aster is a good native ground cover if you have a big space, because it does spread, enthusiastically, shall we say. So those are a few that I would recommend as being good plants. The final one I would recommend would be Carex ice dance. That's a good weed smothering. Wait, I have another one. Epimedium. If this were my plant, my garden, and if I were telling you what to do, which I am right now, I guess, I would plant puddles, groups of 5 of Geranium macrorhizum, Carex ice dance, and Epimedium. And then you would have 3 different colors and textures of foliage. All 3 of those are drought tolerant. The rabbits don't eat them, and they are weed smothering. So Geranium macrorhizum, Carex ice dance, and Epimedium. And I will type the names of those in the Facebook group later in the comments, okay? All right, best time to plant bulbs, ferns, caladiums, other. Well, caladiums are absolute hot weather plants. You don't want to put those out until June, all right? They will not germinate until June because they want really, really warm conditions. In fact, my friend, the late Gordon Gaskill, who used to work in estate greenhouses in Osterville back in the day, he told me that the only way that they would get their caladiums to sprout was to put them in wooden trays on top of the steam pipes in the hothouses, and that would trigger the caladiums. So caladiums, just so you know, they need heat in order to sprout. And ferns, you could plant them if they are perennial ferns that you know are hardy here. You could go ahead and put those in the ground. Most of the summer bulbs, it's too early. The soil is too cold. Dahlias and gladiolas, and it's too early. Okay, you brought Japanese forest grass and the rabbits ate them. That's, you have odd rabbits. I've never had the rabbits touch my forest grass, even when it's not sprayed. So I'm sorry that happened to you. But I would, again, try with the liquid plant skid and spray them, as they grow so that it's covered, and see if that works. How do I encourage tree peonies to bloom? I have beautiful fall foliage, but only get 1 or 2 blossoms per plant. Am I feeding too much or not enough? Here's the secret about tree peonies. You get what you get and you don't get upset. and that is true, because tree peonies are not covered with flowers. I have many tree peonies. They are older plants. I don't fertilize them much, right? But no matter what I do, they don't have a lot of flowers, okay? So number 1, you hope for a fairly mild winter, which we just had. So they should be in pretty good shape right now. So you should have 3 or 4 flowers per plant at least, right? But these are plants that are just not covered with flowers, at least in our area. I have never found them to be, so floriferous. How do you feel about low growth sumac versus bearberry cotoneaster for hillside plantings? I would never plant cotoneaster for a hillside planting. It's not weed smothering. Weeds grow up in between and around it. Nobody wants to be pulling weeds out of your cotoneaster on a hill. Okay, so I would not do it. Low growth sumac, fine. If this is a and you ask about green man juniper, my number 1 choice, Juniperus virginia, Juniperus procumbens nana. Some people call them pro-nana junipers, or some people call them green mound junipers. They are weed smothering. They're evergreen, drought tolerant, so that would be great. And you could, if you wanted, do some of those and some low grow sumac. I think that would be fine. The other plant that's nice on a slope in full sun is our native coreopsis, threadleaf coreopsis, Coreopsis zagreb. Um, the fine coreopsis, that's a fast spreading, great slope, full sun ground cover. So those are a couple suggestions. I started dahlias inside. When I transplant them to outside, probably the middle of May. The soil is far too cold right now. So the middle of May, you may be able to put them outside, but you've got a month to go. Should mandevillas stay in their pots or be planted in the ground? Completely depends on where you want them to grow. The shorter Diplodenia types are great in a pot. They can kind of cascade over. So those are fine, or in the center of a large pot. The larger ones grow up a structure. If you want them to grow up a structure, they will be bigger if you put them in the ground, because then we'll have more root room. And when a plant has more room to stretch its roots, it grows up more up above. So it depends completely on the type of mandevilla you are growing, where you want it to grow, and what you want it to do. Any tips on growing broccoli from seed? I haven't had any luck. Well, like growing anything from seed, don't bury the seed too deeply, number one. Broccoli, I'd definitely start indoors. I would not put it directly in the ground. So I'd start it now. If you haven't started it yet, I would start it now. Inside, I would plant one seed per cell of a 6-pack or small pots. Keep it moist. Maybe use seed starting mix so that it stays moist. After you put them all in their cells, you cover that with a piece of saran wrap or clear plastic to keep it moist while it's sprouting. And then, you should have good luck. I don't know whether you tried them in the ground or not, but you'd have better luck starting them indoors now. Do you have the large pots of rosemary at Country Garden yet? Yes, I saw them outside today when I was at work. So they are outside at Country Garden right now, the first round of them, and you can have them outside. I overwintered a rosemary in a pot, and I put it outside 3 weeks ago. So mine has been outside for 3 weeks and it's been fine. Oh, I'm glad you told me the slideshow was fine. Oh, it's my nightmare, right? That I've done a whole presentation that nobody has been able to see. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Karen. Or Jackie. Thank you very much, Jackie. All right, Karen asked, okay to sow lettuce and kale by seed into the garden right now? Yes, it is, although it's going to take a little longer to germinate, but as long as you keep it moist, lately the weather, right, it's been moist, so we haven't had to worry about that. But the main way that sometimes people don't have success with seeds planted directly in the ground, there are two ways that it can go wrong with seeds planted directly in the ground. Number one can be that they neglect to keep it evenly moist the entire time the seed is germinating and the little thing is coming up, because that's crucial. If you have 3 days of dry, sunny weather and you haven't watered, those little tiny roots or those little tiny seedlings can dry up. So that's the first thing to know. The second thing to know is make sure that your garden is fenced against the rabbits, because they'll eat the new ones, number one. And number two, as soon as you see, particularly the kale, as soon as you see that come up, you might want to dust it with diatomaceous earth, commonly called DE. We have it at Country Garden. If you immediately dust with DE, that prevents earwigs and slugs from eating those little seedlings. And lettuce, by all means, put it out. It will germinate soon. So I have not planted my lettuce outside yet, but I probably will this weekend. Okay, thank you. Thank you for commenting, everybody, on seeing the slideshow. Suggestions for ground cover that will shed. I gave those earlier, so I hope you heard that. Should I worry if my crocus bulbs get clipped by chipmunks or rabbits? No, they'll come back next year still. So, it's interesting. Crocus, sometimes critters leave it alone and sometimes they don't. a chipmunk, frankly, will eat anything it bumps into. So, you know, my philosophy about crocus is plant a lot of them because usually the critters don't eat all of them. Okay, so that's number one. If the critters are eating your crocus next year, as they're just coming up, spray with a repellent. It won't deter the chipmunks, but it certainly will the rabbits. If I just pull the flowers off bittercress, is that sufficient? Or do I need to dig them up roots and all? You don't need to dig them up roots and all because they're not a perennial weed. But the problem with trying to just take the flowers off is if any of them have already gone to seed, as soon as you touch that plant, it's going to spring seeds out. So just know that. To just take the flowers off, you have to do a lot more bending over. Um, if you can hoe them but not bend over. So I leave it up to you, but it does not come back from the roots. So that's good. Amsonia, thank you, Anne. Amsonia hubrectii. That's one of those low maintenance perennials. For sun, it is a native perennial. And I have to tell you that this is a perennial that when people come to my garden during the Hydrangea Festival, it's not in bloom. It blooms early in the spring, all right? But it's one of the plants people say, oh, what's that? Because the foliage is so gorgeous. And it turns a brilliant yellow in November. So it is one of the few perennials that people plant for fall color. And it looks great all summer. And it blooms in the spring. And it's a good pollinator plant. And what else can I say about it? It's an acid in the garden that you don't have to touch from the minute it comes up until it dies back in the fall. I bought a yellow mandevilla last year. It did not do tremendously well. Do the reds do better? Well, I don't know whether you had that in a pot or in the ground. Okay, so, and I don't know if you had it in full sun. I have grown the yellow ones and they've done beautifully. I have grown the yellow ones in pots and the fertility has been high. And I, of course, water it regularly. So I don't know where you grew it, why it didn't do well. If you are planting something in the ground, you want to water it deeply once a week. Don't depend on a fast automatic irrigation system to keep it alive. You want to maybe put some time release fertilizer around that plant so that that promotes growth and flowering because it does flower on the new growth. I have found that any of them that I have grown, yellow, peach, white, red, pink, they have all done well. But I do most of mine in pots where I really control the watering and the fertilization. You want more natives. Are there nurseries that specialize in these? And come into Hyannis Country Garden. We have made a real effort to beef up the natives, particularly in the coming season. If there's a particular group of natives that you're interested in, by all means, come in and fill out a yellow card that goes to Tracy, who does our ordering. But we've got some real native enthusiasts on staff right now and are really making it a point to stock more native plants. And we have, frankly, stocked a lot of native plants in the past, but they aren't always segregated. And so we do have, if you go to the resources page on Hyannis Country Garden list, there are natives for Cape Cod listed. There are also a pollinator listing plants that are all natives that is under the resources section that you can download that list. So come in and see us, all right? Come in and see us. Can you prune Rose of Sharon now? Yes, by all means, get out there and clip away. Rose of Sharon can be pruned now. And so then, all right, let's see. See lots of leaves on epimedium right now. They are last year's. Cut it back. Right. The only maintenance I do on my epimedium is that I either run over it with a lawnmower or cut it off with hedge trimmers or, and I cut those winter worn leaves off in March or early April, and then it comes back with new fresh foliage and flowers. So yes. And I will, as I said, I will put the lists of some carefree perennials in a blog post coming up soon. I don't have time to type it in chat right now because it would take too long. My large front of garden hostas are being removed as sprinkler burns the leaves and the plants are getting too much sun. Which sun-loving perennials can I put in their place? Well, I listed several a little while ago. Okay, I would definitely recommend Nepeta. I would definitely recommend the Stokesaster. I would definitely recommend that Amsonia hubrechtii. If you want a fall blooming plant, the native Vernonia iron butterfly is another one that has fabulous foliage all summer and then purple flowers in the fall. I love Sheffield pink chrysanthemums for a fall flower. That is a great, great plant. So those are just a few, but know this about your irrigation, okay? Um, you should not have your irrigation coming on every day or every other day and hitting perennials because yeah, it's bad for hostas, but it's bad for all the other ones too. So you want your garden to be watered every 5 to 7 days for perennials, not frequently. Should I put anything on my hydrangeas now to strengthen them? Here's what you need to know. All right, good soil strengthens plants. Fertilizer does not. Most people think that fertilizer makes plants stronger. Just the opposite is true. Fertilizer makes plants grow bigger, right? And pushes weaker growth. But for stronger plants, you just want good soil. Now, do go to the blog that I wrote this week for Hyannis Country Garden because it was about how to make hydrangea stems stronger. Because I had somebody email to the store. And so I wrote a whole blog post about it at hyanniscountrygarden.com. Read that blog post, and what you will find out is that a lot of stem strength on hydrangeas is genetic. And so an endless summer is never going to have great stem strength because it's just not genetically for that. So you want to just accept that on some plants, okay? But do read that blog post and know there's nothing that you should put on your hydrangeas right now to make them stronger. Okay, rabbits ate your forest grass too. Oh, and since you've sprayed with plant skid, that's good. Okay. You know, I don't know why I've gotten away. Maybe I've been lucky, or maybe don't tell my rabbits that I have it. When should I plant daylily bulbs? You can plant them now, Zachary. If you've purchased daylilies in a root form, by all means, you can plant them now. That's good. And we talked about cutting off epimedium. Yes, you can cut them off. How do you start dahlias inside? If you want to start them inside, Robert, you fill pots full of potting soil and stick them in, and you water them, and you keep them in front of a sunny window. You can also, by the way, start them in early May outside in pots in a sunny place because the pots being outside and particularly in sun are going to be warmer than the ground temperature is. And you can get accelerated dahlias by putting those tubers in pots in early May outside and not then have them in the house. So you might want to try that. What material is, oh, your rosemary survived the winter, Julie. Great. That's wonderful. We had a zone 8 winter, I have to say. We've had the warmest winter that I've ever experienced in my 30 some odd years on Cape Cod. So we've had many things. And if my Salvia mexicana hasn't survived the winter, I'm going to be annoyed because that's a zone 8 plant that normally I say goodbye to. And I expect it to come back this year. Okay, what's the best material for pots? Terracotta? Totally depends on what you want to look at, number one. And it depends on whether you want to leave that pot outside over the winter. Because if it stays outside over the winter, terracotta will break, right? So you want metal or plastic or wood for outside over the winter. And yeah, that's it. Now, we are unfortunately out of time. I've got a few questions that I have not answered. I've just saved chat to my computer so that I can answer those questions for you on the blog at hyanniscountrygarden.com the next couple of days. All right. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. It's always a pleasure to be with you people and celebrate something wonderful like growth and spring. You have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you at the next happy hour. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.